everybody. I'm Joe Marcello, joined as always by my partner in crime, Orrin Phillips.
Good evening, everybody.
We are the Dollar Bin Bandits, and you are listening to the Dollar Bin Bandit podcast. Well, everyone, it's Wednesday and right before Thanksgiving. So before you get your fill of turkey and the tryptophan kicks in and you start to fall asleep, play the latest episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits. It will just lull you to sleep, or it'll wake you up, whichever way. Anyway, we are going to be bringing you our interview with none other than Bob McLeod. He's a comic book artist that you may be familiar with, specifically his works on Conan the Barbarian, The Incredible Hulk, Legion of Superheroes, as well as he was instrumental in starting the Superman Man of Steel line.
Yeah, also a big factor in the Dawn of the New Mutants books. And one thing I asked him about, because I'd never met anyone who worked for Gold Key Comics before. He did some work for them. So because I'm such a niche, nerdy kind of guy, hearing that was just a wonderful story. A guy who, you know, has done so much and is so modest about it. For Thanksgiving, we are truly thankful to have spoken to Mr. McLeod. And without further ado, Bob McLeod.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, like we do with everyone, how did you get your start into comic books?
You know, it takes a while if you want me to tell the whole story. It's actually, I think, a very interesting story. I'm from Tampa, Florida, and grew up and lived in Tampa until I was ready to start my career. And the only thing I knew was that pretty much that the work was in New York City. They weren't doing comics out of Florida. So I figured I had to go to New York to get my career started in some way. And I wasn't just thinking about comics. I was thinking about advertising primarily, doing advertising work. My goal was originally to have my own newspaper comic strip. Comics, I wasn't a big comic book fan. I was into Mad Magazine more than comic books. Even though I liked comics. I read Superman comics and Archie comics and the Harvey line of comics when I was a kid. But I got into Mad Magazine much more than the other comics as a teenager. So anyway, I said, well, I hate to do it, but I sold my sports car. I had an MGB that I loved. And I sold that to finance my trip to New York City to get my career going. So I flew into LaGuardia, and it took me, I stayed at the YMCA in Queens, because it was like $7 a night or something. It was really cheap to stay there. Got a room at the Y, and it took me a week to build up my courage to go into Manhattan. Because, back then there is people in the South, all we heard about was these muggings. And I figured as soon as I went into Manhattan, I'd get killed. So I just sat in the Y doing some samples and building up my courage. Finally got into New York around the time of the New York Comic Con, and figured I'd go check that out, and happened to meet someone who was in my high school art class back in Tampa. I walked in the door, and there's this guy from my art class, and we didn't know each other. I was a year ahead of him. He was sitting on one side of the class, I was on the other, kind of keeping to ourselves. I mean, I met him in class, and I thought, hey, somebody else that can draw. And because our teacher, when I got in her class, she just, oh, you draw better than I do. Just go sit over there and do whatever you want. So I didn't learn anything in that art class. And that was my only art class all through school. I wasn't offered an art class all through grade school. So anyway, this guy said, he looked at me and, pointed, and I pointed, he said, weren't you in Mrs. Nimitz art class? And yeah, and it turned out to be Pat Broderick. And Pat and I became roommates, and he was trying to get into the DC apprenticeship program that they had at the time. And I said, all right, I'll go for that too. And he got into the program and I did not. And so he met some people up at DC Comics going in that program. And so he started telling me, you really should come up and meet Neil Adams. And I, meanwhile, had been showing my portfolio around, could barely get in at Marvel to show anybody. And the art director at DC Comics at the time, Joe Orlando, looked at my stuff and he said, wow, you put a lot of work into this, but you need to go back to school and learn how to draw. Oh. He was not at all impressed. So I was doing samples and getting rejected, and I didn't really know the status of Neil Adams. I knew he was a good artist. I liked his art, but I was thinking, well, he's just another artist like me. What good's it going to do me to meet Neil Adams? But finally, Pat talked me into it. I went up to Neil's studio, and Neil looked at my samples, and he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, anything that pays. Because by that time, the money from my car had run out. I was down to like my last $10, literally. I was ready to phone my parents and have them send me bus money to get back to Tampa. And Neil's picked up the phone and called Marvel Comics production manager, John Verporten, and said, I got a guy here with some lettering potential, some art potential, but lettering potential. Do you need anybody in production? And so they hired me just on Neil's recommendation without ever looking at my artwork. Wow. And so I started, in a couple of days, working in the art department, doing lettering corrections and what used to be called paste up and mechanicals. And part of my job was actually taping the page numbers onto the original art before it was statted. I worked my way up after a couple months to doing art corrections in addition to lettering corrections. So I really feel like I started at the rock bottom of the business. And it was actually a great way to learn, because being right there in the production department, I could meet all of the editors and show them my work. And eventually one of them agreed to give me a shot. So you can't even start that way anymore. But it was a terrific way for me to get in the business.
Who were some of, at that point, and then obviously later on, when you're in the business, who were some of your artistic, mentors or inspiration, I should say, really, artistically? Yeah,
well, like I said, Mad Magazine, I was a really huge Mort Drucker fan, who did the TV and movie satires for Mad Magazine. Mm-hmm. Also Jack Davis, but primarily I just wanted to be Mort Drucker, basically. Wanted to work for Mad, but I felt I could do an imitation of Mort Drucker, but I didn't want to do it in the same magazine he was working in, because I couldn't quite measure up to Mort Drucker. So I never even tried to get work at Mad. But a lot of my early work, I started working for Marvel's Crazy magazine. So anyway, Mort Drucker was my big influence, but after a few months of, actually my first printed job was a satire of Westworld for Crazy magazine. But after a few months of being in the production department, I realized that everybody was just totally into the dramatic comics, and they didn't care that much about the humor comics. And if I wanted to have a successful career, I needed to learn how to do more realistic comics. So in my opinion, the best artists at that at the time were Neil Adams and John Buscema. So I studied everybody, but those were my big two that I went to, kind of learning storytelling and posing, anatomy from John Buscema, and all of the surface flash stuff from Neil Adams, rendering, his inking, how he would light figures and stuff. And then Tom Palmer also, I studied his inking a lot.
I'm fascinated because I've spoken to someone who's worked at Charlton, someone who's worked at Atlas. You're the first person who, I know you didn't work there very long, but you did some work with Gold Key. How did you get linked up with Gold Key? Because what I remember, I mean, it's a little before my time, but the covers on those comics were so beautiful.
Yeah.
Things. How did you get linked up with them?
Through Neil Adams. I got a desk up at Neil's Continuity Studios. What we did was rent office space from Neil pretty cheaply. And I was trying to break into the drawing comics and not getting anywhere at Marvel and DC. So Neil suggested, why don't you just try a smaller company? You know, instead of Marvel and DC, try one of the smaller publishers. I don't know if he suggested Gold Key or if I just looked and said, oh, well, I'll give Gold Key a shot. And so I approached them and they were happy to give me a chance. So I did some penciling and inking on a few jobs for them.
Were they located in New York City as well, or were they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. At the time, this was 74.
Right.
As a part, I'm sorry, Oren, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I think it's, I'm a big Universal horror fan, so the fact that you worked on Boris Karloff's, but even though he had nothing to do with these stories,
Yeah.
but his name and face on it.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was so cool. And were they pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? Did they look over your work and give you critique and stuff like that, or were they just happy to put something out the door?
You know, my whole career, almost nobody ever gave me a critique. It was very hard to get any kind of mentoring or advice. I mean, Neil said a couple things to me, like just slow down and take more care with each line. In my inking, John Romita said, why don't you try to be primarily a brush inker or primarily a pen inker instead of mixing it all up? Because I didn't know what I was doing when I started out inking. You know, Joe Rubenstein and I used to critique each other's inking. But penciling, I was just kind of on my own. I was just studying John Buscema and Russ Heath. Russ was right there in Neil's studio. And Dick Giordano, and then trying to figure out, well, where do these guys learn how to do this? And so I went back to the old newspapers, comic artists, and started studying, you know, Hal Foster, Alex Raymond, you know, all the early beginners. So I studied a lot of people, but I never had anybody actually teach me much.
As a part of the work you did at Gold Key, was it the stuff you did on Twilight Zone fascinates me because, one, I'm a huge Twilight Zone fan, but was there any involvement from like the people that did the show, or was it more or less just transferring those stories into comic book form?
You know, I love how people outside the industry assume that there's all this back and forth connection.
You mean you're not on the phone with them, like?
Yeah, Rod Serling and
Rod,
I never met.
what's up?
And the editors at Gold Key handed me the script. I did the job. I turned it in. They gave me another script. I did the job. There was nothing. No, do it this way. Don't do that. Nothing. And the only reason I quit working for him is I started getting work at Marvel and DC. So it was a great place to kind of make my mistakes and do some bad stuff before even though I still did bad stuff at Marvel, but you know, it helped me get through the rough stuff before starting at Marvel and DC. They were very easy to work for at Gold Key. As I said, no problems at all, no feedback, positive or negative, really. If there was positive feedback, I don't remember it. And I know there was no negative feedback. So it was a good experience. It was fun fun to draw Rod Serling up in the little corner there.
I have to say, out of all these, interviews that we've done, I think it's probably the most eye-opening for Oren and I that there wasn't this, not that there wasn't camaraderie, I'm sure there was, but I think from, the public and, the collectors such as us, we think that the inkers and the pencilers and the artists, they're all together right next to one another, and they're basically doing one page, passing it off, here, you do that. And, we come to find a lot of people didn't even talk to one another.
Right.
The writers and the illustrators and whatnot, I just mail it to them. And I didn't even talk to the guy until I saw him 20 years later.
Yeah, a lot of them we never meet in person. It's like that in the studios. If you share a studio with somebody, the Image guys, used to work in a studio together. Bernie Wrightson and Barry Smith and Mike Kaluta, Jeff Jones used to have a studio together. And working up at Continuity with Neil, everybody would pass artwork around, and we'd talk, about the art and everything. I could stand there and watch Neil ink, look over his shoulder while he was doing those fantastic Tarzan paintings, so that was another wonderful experience. But Marvel, you'd go up there, they'd hand you a job and you'd take it home and work on it and turn it in, and they'd say, "Oh, good, you made the deadline. Thanks." They'd give you another job, or they wouldn't. Almost no feedback. Even if they didn't like it, they didn't like to tell you they didn't like it. You just wouldn't get another job from them. DC, pretty much the same thing. I guess some people are more outgoing than I am. So I guess if I had made the effort to say, well, what do you think? How am I doing? Did you like what I did there? Or, maybe I would have gotten more feedback, but I was still am kind of shy, and I didn't seek those comments out. So I guess I just never got them.
I would say you definitely, they like what you did at Marvel. I just want to talk about a few things you did there. First of all, G.I. Joe, number one. This is like Joe and I's grail.
Yeah.
When you got assigned this, did you think to yourself, this has some potential? Or was it like, it's a comic based on some toys. Let me just, it might be a good start.
The reason they gave me that, and it's, it's kind of sad in a way, because the reason they gave it to me, a long-time Marvel artist, Herb Trimpe, they felt his style was looking dated. It wasn't cool anymore in the way that some of the artists were, the younger artists. And Herb was a great guy. I liked him. But they asked me, when they gave me that job, to kind of dress it up a little bit, try to make it a little more flashy.
Right.
So I kind of did that and took over a lot. So there's not a lot of Herb's. I mean, he has a very strong style, so it comes through. Right. But there's not a lot of his lighting and rendering in it, because I was kind of turning it in a Neil Adams direction. But as far as it being a property or a hot job or something, I never had G.I. Joe toys when I was a kid. I was a little past my time, and I wasn't into G.I. Joe, and it just seemed like Marvel was trying these gimmick comics, and it was just one of those. And I said, well, maybe this will take off, maybe it won't. It was basically just another job to me.
It stood the test of time, though. I mean, it's
yeah.
Are you surprised by how much it means to people, and how it's lasted this long?
I don't know if surprised, impressed. I mean, fans come up to me and like you, and it's their favorite thing in the world, and they just love that I was involved with it. I was just talking to somebody recently, a fan of my work, and he said, "You did G.I. Joe? I didn't know you did G.I. Joe," and he was so excited. I mean, people that love G.I. Joe really love G.I. Joe. Right. And I did a lot of covers inking over Mike Zeck and Ron Wagner, and some other people. I inked one other inside job. I forget who penciled that one. But you know, I did a lot of G.I. Joe.
Yeah, it's I think I bought that comic 3 or 4 times at this point, and it's because, like, you know, I owned it originally when it came out, and this is during a time when I wasn't, you know, I was very young, couldn't really appreciate comics, and then gave it to somebody because I was like, yeah, I don't need comics. Then years later, I'm like, this is stupid. Of course I like comics. Ended up buying it again, and then for some reason forgot I had it and bought, you know. Anyway.
You still got those 4 copies?
I have 3 of them.
Yep, there you go.
The original ones that I owned, I don't have. But, I mean, the other ones I have are of the same, you know, era, same time release. So, you know, I still feel good about myself. So in doing our homework on you, I read that, and I'm jumping to Oren's other comic that he has there, The New Mutants. I read that the work you did on New Mutants was a very frustrating period for you. Do you still think that to this day, looking back? Because, I mean, New Mutants is pretty huge, you know, like, you know, to say the least. You know, it is, you know, maybe the movie didn't quite catch on, but, you know, in terms of comics, it was my jam for a while.
Yeah, and at least there was a movie.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, it's huge, or has been huge, and again, very lucky that I was able to be part of that. It was frustrating for a couple reasons. It was really my first penciling assignment, a regular penciling assignment. I had done some fill-ins before that. My first pencil fill-in job, published superhero penciling, was in '79, Guardians of the Galaxy Spider-Man team-up comic. And after that, I did 1 or 2 other Spider-Man fill-ins. Seems like maybe another job. And then they needed somebody to fill in on the X-Men to finish up a job that Jim Sherman had started and had to abandon. He had just barely started laying out some pages. So I finished penciling that job, and they liked what I did there. Let me do the next issue, 152. I penciled that one all by myself, and Joe Rubenstein inked it. And they said, well, you know, we'd like you to be the regular penciler on the X-Men if you want, or we're doing this spin-off of the X-Men, a younger team of mutants. We haven't got a title for it yet. Chris is still working out his ideas for the characters and everything. You could be the co-creator on that series. And why they offered that to me, I'll never know. I was just in the right place at the right time. Everybody else was busy, is all I can assume, you know. And I said, well, I really want to draw the X-Men, but I'm never going to get another chance to be a co-creator probably. So I better snap up this new project. And that turned out to be the New Mutants. But it was frustrating because it was going to be a regular comic, and there was no deadline. I was going to have all the time in the world to do my best work that I could possibly do. And I got, like, I forget how many pages in, 3 or 4 or 5 pages in. And at the same time, the graphic novel line was starting up, and they were looking for projects to turn into graphic novels. And they needed a project for graphic novel number 4. And they said, oh, good timing. Let's turn the New Mutants into a graphic novel. And I was excited about that because it was going to be full color instead of the regular flat color, going to be on nice paper and everything. But the graphic novels were on a hard schedule, and it was already a little bit behind schedule because they had been looking for a project for number 4. And so instead of having all the time in the world, suddenly I was behind schedule. And instead of 20 pages, it was like 50 pages. So I had to just draw as fast as I could draw. And it was my first regular assignment. I just wasn't that comfortable with my penciling yet. I was still working out my anatomy and how to present a panel, you know, what to put in, what not to put in, where to put the figures, what angle to show them from, how to pose, just everything involved with drawing comics. I was still kind of learning and working out. And so I just had to jump in and start moving the pencil. And then they said, all right, we're going to give this to somebody else to ink it because we're so close to the deadline. I said, oh, please, this is a graphic novel. You got to let me ink this. And, you know, of course, at that time, I was much better known as an inker and more sought after as an inker than a penciler. And I knew I could make my own penciling look better if I inked it myself than if they gave it to somebody else. So they said, okay, but you know, we got to have it by this date. And just coincidentally, I was getting married right at that time. And so I ended up having to ink it during my honeymoon.
Oh man.
And got it inked, but again, just inking as fast as I could ink. So instead of it being my best work, it was some of the most rushed out work that I've done in my career. And then, you know, jumping right onto the first issue, second issue, third issue, just rush, rush, rush. I just wasn't ready to knock out pages that fast. So I wasn't happy with the way the work was looking. My pencils were rough and quick, and the inker that I had was kind of a newer inker, Mike Gustovich, and he tried really hard, but of course he was working over my rushed pencils. So I wasn't happy with the way the inks were looking. And I said, well, maybe I can control the look of the work more if I switch to inking it. And so the editor said, fine, you know, Louise Simonson, she was such a great editor. You know, if that's what you want, yeah, just find somebody to do breakdowns for me. And so they got Sal Buscema. And Sal's such a great artist, but Sal was doing like 3 or 4 books a month at that time. And New Mutants was just another book to him. I mean, to all of us, we didn't know if the book was going to last 10 issues and go away or going to be a big success or what. At that time, 3 issues into it, the graphic novel had gone over well, but we still didn't know. And so Sal approached it the way he approached every other job he did, just doing competent storytelling, very, very good work, but nothing, you know, special about it. Where I was trying to make these characters really look like kids and have certain personalities and make it a different look from your average superhero comic book. So I ended up like really taking over a lot on Sal's layouts. And after, you know, 3 or 4 issues of that, I just got tired of trying to rework Sal's drawing into my drawing. And I'm sure Sal didn't appreciate it, but, you know, I figured it was my book and I had the right to make it look the way that I had created these characters to look. But it was just, I just was really rushed and unhappy with it and didn't know how to make it better. So I just said, you know, I think I'll move on to something else.
So to that point, I have to ask, like, you really touched on, I mean, just an amazing, just an array of like all characters from, I mean, DC and Marvel. Now, in your career, have you been given the luxury of kind of choosing, or do you, and we've heard, you know, kind of both sides of this over the few months we've been doing this, is that a lot of people are in the right place at the right time where they need, you know, the work needed to get done, and they were like, "Hey, do you want to do this?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And that kind of is kind of how it rolled for them. Whereas other people were kind of, I guess, needling their way into like, I want to do this or this.
Yeah, I think that was mostly later that artists started doing that. Back in the early 70s and up to around 1980 or so, you more often just took what was available, what job they offered you. I mean, at the time we were able to just hang out in the office all day. Now you have to make an appointment. You go in and see your editor, then you're kicked out. You know, you can't just hang around. And I got most of my opportunities by being there in the office. The job would come in and the editor saying, "Oh, who are we going to get to do this?" I'll take that. Thank you. You know, so a lot of my early inking jobs, I got that way. And then I was pressing them to give me some penciling jobs. But again, I didn't say, I want to do Moon Knight or I want to do Spider-Man or whatever. I just, what have you got? Please give me something. And that's what they gave me. And then the New Mutants, like I said, I was just there, right place, right time, when everybody else must have been busy. And then after that, right after that, somebody left Star Wars. I think maybe Walt Simonson had been drawing Star Wars and they needed a penciler for that. And they offered that to me, but I didn't say, "Hey, can I please do Star Wars?" Because of course I was a Star Wars fan, but I just took the jobs they gave me. Really, my whole career, I never went after anything. I was working on the Hulk, inking Dale Keown, having a great time inking Dale on the Hulk. And Jerry Ordway came in. I met him up at the Marvel office when I was turning in a job. And he said, "You know, I like your penciling. Why don't you do more penciling?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know, just busy inking right now." And he said, "Well, we're looking for a penciler on Superman. Would you be interested in giving that a try?" And I said, "Superman, sure." You know, Superman was one of the main comics I read as a kid. So that was like, to me, like a prestige assignment. So I said, "Yeah, sure." So I went over to DC and did what did I do? A few pages of an annual or something. Inked a job over Kerry Gamble, and then they gave me the assignment of penciling Action Comics. So again, I didn't go after Superman. It just kind of fell in my lap.
Now, that wasn't just any Action Comics. That was the one where Clark reveals his secret identity to Lois.
Yeah. And there was 3 different teams there. There was Dan Jurgens and Jerry Ordway and Roger Stern. And I think Jerry was writing and penciling. Dan was maybe writing, penciling. And Roger didn't draw, so they needed me to draw for that. And so we would take turns in the storylines doing different things. And for whatever reason, the moment when he revealed himself to Lois like that, my turn came up, I guess. Mm. Again, I didn't say, "Oh, please let me draw that issue." They just gave it to me. So again, just so many lucky breaks in my career.
So for, you know, events like that in a character such as Superman, which has now obviously become a significant moment in Superman history, you know, when you're creating that stuff, you know, I understand and respect that it's your job and this is how you're going about. But do you feel any certain sense of I don't know, gravitas to that storyline, or, you know, or is it just like, well, I'm going to draw it and, you know, this is what they want, you know? Help us a shirt there, Superman. Okay, done. Move it on.
I mean, as I said at the beginning, I wasn't really a comic book fan. I mean, I really like comics. Certainly enjoyed working on them in my career, but I wasn't an average, you know, just fan so much. So it was, I felt an honor to be drawing Superman, but it was a job. I had a family, I was raising kids. It was not something that I was really absorbed in, like Jerry was telling me I should have more input into the writing. Well, I'm not a writer. I just wanted to draw the comics. I like drawing figures. I really like drawing figures more than drawing superheroes, so whether it's Jimmy Olsen or Clark Kent, or whether it's Captain America or Superman, I just like drawing human figures. So, I mean, I didn't care if Superman was flying in outer space or hanging around the Daily Planet, or getting killed or getting married or whatever. I was just doing the job.
Fair enough. I have one last question before I pass it off to Oren. So it's probably the same thing, but I really admire the work you did on the Star Wars series, because that was, like the original comic book series. Was it in tandem with the movies or kind of after the fact?
No, I think they were still making the movies as we were doing that. And there was actually a lot of issues with the writers would come up with these ideas and Lucasfilm would say, oh no, you can't do that. We're considering that for one of the movies.
Okay. Yeah. So that was kind of one of my questions was their involvement by Lucas in the production of the comics, because
not in the production, but in saying
story.
Yes or no, don't do that, you can do this. I guess they showed them every script that they wrote. I don't know that they ever had any feedback on the artwork. But that was great fun drawing Star Wars, being inked by my idol, Tom Palmer. He asked me to draw breakdowns on it. And I was happy to do that because I wanted to see what he would do with my drawings as opposed to what I might do with them in the inking. It was great to see what he did. But as much as I liked his inking and still, of course, like his inking, I always wanted to ink my own pencils. So I basically left every penciling job I ever had because I wanted to ink my own pencils and I wasn't fast enough to do that on a monthly basis. So after a few issues of penciling breakdowns on Star Wars, I just wanted to have more of an involvement on the finished look of the art instead of just doing the storytelling. Because unlike some pencilers like Ron Frenz, maybe John Byrne, Jerry Ordway, they're really into the storytelling. Sal Buscema, they really enjoy doing the layouts and the storytelling, where my interest is much more in the figure drawing and the rendering and the whole package instead of just the beginning.
Understood.
I just want to jump back to New Mutants for a second, because when you and Chris Claremont were throwing ideas back and forth about the book, how, in your mind, how different was what you were imagining to what you drew, with the characters? Or was it pretty much spot on?
Chris is such a creative guy. He had all these ideas for what the characters would do and where the stories were going to go. And he didn't really have much direction. He didn't give me much direction on what they should look like. That was just all me, basically. He said, do some sketches and let's see what you come up with. And so I did some figure studies and showed them, and they said, oh, we like this better than this. And so they ended up looking the way they look. But it was just all out of my head, just not my very first impressions of what they should look like, but my second impressions.
Gotcha.
You know, just trying to make them look like kids and not look like Superman and Wonder Woman. So I did have a great time doing Star Wars. So that was fun to draw all those characters, of course.
Oh, I'm you know, like I know, you know, you say that, you know, this is, you know, this is your work, and that's how you treat it as the assignment. But at some point, I mean, I'm sure the fan in you must be like, this is kind of cool.
Well, let me tell you, I was drawing Star Wars at my home in Tampa. I had moved back to Tampa from New York once my work was really steady, and because it's cheaper to live in Tampa than New York City. So I was in Tampa working on the Star Wars, and the local comic shop owner had this whole set of Star Wars action figures. And so it's, hey, man, can I borrow those to use those as reference for all these characters and their clothing and their costumes and whatever? So he said, okay. And he generously lent me his collection to draw from. So I've got those sitting in my studio, and I'm working away. And my little 3-year-old nephew came in and saw those. And it was, you know, wanted to play with them. I said, oh, those don't belong to me. I can't let you play with them. You can look at them, but you can't play with them. I'm sorry. And so they went out and asked my wife, he said, does Uncle Bob just sit in there and play with the Star Wars guys all day?
Yeah, I get a similar treatment from my wife, because I have, you know, stuff, I have the stuff behind me, and then I got other stuff on shelves here. So when my kids were old enough, you know, they would come down here and they would look at all the stuff on the shelves and just start grabbing. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, but they're toys, Dad. I'm like,
yeah,
you don't get it. You don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, this job, drawing comics, is such a great job, because you are doing fun stuff like that instead of, I did some advertising where I was like drawing fingernail polish bottles with different labels and storyboards of people in a hot air balloon.
Much more,
you know, not Star Wars and not Spider-Man. So comics are definitely fun to draw. Even not being a huge fan of superheroes, I am a fan of the comic art form. So it was just great to be able to do that for my career. I'm so lucky to have had the career I've had doing such a fun job. Even though it can be really hard work, and it is a job, you have to draw when you don't want to draw. Mm-hmm. You have to work when maybe your family wants you to go on a picnic or whatever. You have to work on the weekends and holidays, and sometimes overnight and everything. It can be a really tense, frustrating, demanding job, but it's still a pretty great job.
Seems pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I just have one more New Mutant, sorry, before I handle the family situation. And it's just that, you know, you co-created it. So there's skin in the game. The book means something to you. It's, for me personally, it's rare to find a book that, I don't want to say it took a 180, but it certainly changed from issue 1 to where it ended. As a co-creator, and you know, not positive or negative, but when you see a book that you started and how it ended so differently, what were your thoughts about that?
Probably, as you can imagine, they're my babies. And so to see someone else raise your kids basically is how it feels. Right. When I left the book, I was pretty much done with it. I didn't want to see what the other artists were going to do. And of course, I did occasionally get a glimpse of what Sal was doing on it, or Tom Mandrake. And then when Bill Sienkiewicz came on, everybody was like, wow, that really looks different. What is he doing? And a lot of people hated what Bill was doing on it, you know, and a lot of people loved what he was doing on it. But it was so different from what I had done. And then after him, different artists came on, and then it kind of just turned into X-Force and everything. I mean, it went into so many different directions that I wasn't interested in, and different looks. I really didn't pay much attention to it at all after I left it, because I didn't want to see how these other people were raising my kids.
Oh, perfectly understandable.
Yeah, it's not the first we've heard that from people. And I think all of us want to secretly know, like, do you guys really check in on what's going on? They're like, no, we don't. Nope, we're done.
I would see certain things like miniseries where they would bring some artist in because he was the new young artist and had this kind of manga influence style or whatever. And he would draw Roberto the same height and body build as Sam. Sunspot and Cannonball are supposed to be totally different body types. It's just frustrating to see that, it's like when I think it was Dave Cockrum maybe did the first Wolverine, and he designed him to be a little short guy, 5'3", 5'5", maybe a little short, tough little guy. And, then he gets bigger and bigger and taller as the years go by. All these superhero artists eventually end up making everybody look like Superman or Captain America or the Hulk. They don't make them such individuals. Whatever. There's people that like what they do, and there's people that like what other people do. There's so many different kinds of art. Every art's so subjective. But my interest was always in drawing individuals rather than stereotypes, if I could. That was my goal anyway.
Yeah, I think you accomplished it.
So I have to ask, when Ord and I kind of started doing this series, one of the things we discussed was 90s comic book gimmick covers. And forgive me if that's not like the proper term for it, but that's kind of how we refer to it. And I bring that up because you did an issue of Spectacular Spider-Man that had a hologram cover.
Yeah.
And they're cool. I mean, not knocking them, but I think those gimmicks kind of went overboard. They were a bit excessive during that time period. What are your thoughts on that, out of curiosity?
Yeah, that was a big thing. And I did a few comics maybe with those special covers. To me, comics really should be on cheap paper and cost a quarter instead of $4 or $5 on expensive paper.
If you're lucky now, yeah.
It's great to see some of the flashy stuff they can do with Photoshop and all these digital programs. The fancy covers, like you say, they're cool. I like that hologram cover on an issue of Spider-Man that I have a little 10-page job in, I think. Mm-hmm. They're cool. I'd rather see artwork on the cover, actually, myself. I like artwork on covers. When I did a Venom miniseries, and the first issue, they wanted to do one of those covers, some really tricky, gimmicky cover. And I said, oh, come on, man, let me draw the cover. And we said, well, we're looking to do something a little different here. I said, well, let me see what I can come up with, at least give me a shot at it. And so I did, I don't know if you're familiar with the cover of the first issue of my Venom miniseries, but it's a glow-in-the-dark cover.
Oh, no.
Venom's eyes
awesome.
and his tongue and drooling tongue. And they liked my design and used it, thank goodness. It's unlike anything else I've ever done pretty much. But I was really just trying to come up with something that they would use, and luckily I did.
I want to ask quickly about Spider-Man, because you've drawn him for different books over different periods of time. How have you has your art style changed with each time you do it through the years, or have you pretty much tried to keep it uniform?
Well, back when I started, my first job was a Spider-Man team up, right? And at that time, you pretty much had to keep Spider-Man on the John Romita model. They didn't want him looking different than John Romita's Spider-Man. And they would have John Romita change Peter Parker to look like his Peter Parker if you didn't draw it the same way. So I pretty much had to try to make it look like John Romita's up to a point. And of course, I was not influenced by John Romita. I was more influenced by Neil Adams and Tom Palmer and John Buscema. And so it was kind of a giving Marvel what they wanted and trying to do what I wanted at the same time. And then as the years went by, that loosened up, mainly because Todd McFarlane couldn't draw Peter Parker the way that Romita did. But they liked what he was doing with Spider-Man, so they let it go. And then, Image took off, and it became more about the artist than about the house style. And I started just drawing him whatever was comfortable at the time. I don't know. Sometimes I would make him more muscular. Sometimes I'd make him less muscular. Just whatever I felt like, really.
Did you enjoy being on Spider-Man, or was there, kind of a pressure because there were so many different variations of him at the time?
No, he's probably my favorite superhero to draw because he gets in these interesting poses. He's a fun character to draw. I like his original Ditko costume. I like the black costume too, but I think I prefer his old Ditko costume.
I have my last question for you. And
I've heard that before.
I've said that a few times. I'm sorry. Be mindful of your time. So this is legit is my last question.
There's no rush. I'm just kidding.
So as you can see, I'm a Superman fan, and you've created a couple of characters, Atomic Skull and Blaze, which I love Atomic Skull because I thought it was just a pretty cool character. I mean, and the way they transitioned him and still use him in New 52 and then also in the animated series was pretty cool. How did you come about with, creating a character like
that? With the Atomic Skull, in the script, I think it just said this guy's, Roger gave me a description of what he thought he should look like. That's what I drew. I mean, Blaze, I think.
No.
I don't know if I was the first one to draw Blaze. If I was, again, I was just kind of following the description in the plot. And it wouldn't be an exact description. They would just kind of make this guy's head blazing like Ghost Rider, or, have this woman have skin tight outfit, or I don't know, have her dark and mysterious looking, or have her redheaded and sexy, just general descriptions, and then you'd come up with whatever you came up with.
Fair enough. I think as fans, we're always looking for some deep answer. Well, you see, my son was born and it came to no.
Yeah. The problem is deadlines. If you just had the time to sit around and really give this the thought that it demands really, and that you should put into it, it'd be one thing. But most of the time, I've got to draw this page. It's got a character called Blaze. I got to get that 2 pages done today, and I just start drawing.
Is there or was there any particular character that you wanted to really just sink your teeth into and thought that you could really just, hit a home run with it, that you haven't had a chance to do so?
Not really, because again, the characters. I didn't even after I was in the business. I didn't really read the books that much. My favorite series was Tomb of Dracula that Gene Colan was working on. Marv Wolfman was writing it. I really liked those stories, but that's not superhero. And then I liked. There's a Western, a French Western series called Lieutenant Blueberry, a Western. The superhero comics, they're great fun, but I just wasn't into them the way so many people are into them to the point where, oh, I really want to do Batman, see what I can do with Batman or Green Lantern or that's just not where my interest is. At heart, I'm really more of a humor artist. Like I said, my goal was to have my own newspaper comic strip, humor strip, work for Mad Magazine. There's never been a superhero character really that I thought about outside of the job.
Fair enough.
I'm sorry for that answer, but that's
no, I appreciate your honesty. I mean, look, again, like, there's a certain amount of naivete on the part of fans because, again, we have this, preconceived notion that all the artists, everyone's huddled together, they're banging out ideas at midnight. How about this? How about that? And that there's some like a major epiphany when it comes to, to creating something. And, look, 9 times out of 10, it's just the work and they're doing it. And I get it because I've been in, the end of, creative projects and they're not all like some deep meaning to everything. So.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's a group effort. And even if you do have an idea that you're attached to, it gets shot down, and you got to make adjustments and concessions to other people's desires. It's usually a team effort doing comics. One person's writing, another's drawing, another lettering, another inking, another coloring. So I just, took the jobs as they came and enjoyed my job and raised my family and started playing tennis. As much fun as working in comics is, it was my job and not my passion so much.
That's awesome. Your family is a priority, and I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, when I started out, I saw a lot of artists who didn't have a family, who were just working nonstop all the time, didn't have a life outside of their work. And I didn't want to be that person. I wanted to have a family. I wanted to be married and have a family and not just, even though my family thinks I work all the time, I don't, compared to so many people in this business.
Fair enough.
Well, we want to thank you for your art and your inking and all that you did, because so many of your books have been such a part of our, journey through comics. So thank you so much, sir.
You're so welcome. And I've been so lucky to work on the projects that I worked on, particularly because I didn't go out and shoot for them. They kind of just came to me by chance. So I've been very fortunate and very grateful that I've been able to have the career that I've had, and so grateful for my fans, people who appreciate the work I've done. So thank you too.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. So thank you so much for your time. Is there a website or anything you'd like to promote that we can link to?
Yeah, sure. I have a website, bobmcleod.com, if you can remember that.
Easy enough.
And a lot of my original art is for sale on there, and projects that I am in the process of doing will be on there. Right now I'm doing a variant cover. I'm represented by MB Artist right now, and they're doing a series of comic covers over older public domain comics. So this one, I can show it to you. I just finished penciling. I just finished the outlining of the inks. It's for Captain Marvel, a Shazam cover, but an old Shazam comic. So he's having us artists do new covers for these old comics, like variant covers for these old comics, and we sell them at conventions. So I'm doing a few of those and various commissions. But I don't really look for work in the comics anymore. I kind of consider myself retired from doing comic book stories, but I'm still doing a lot of art.
That's awesome. That looks awesome.
Right. Yeah.
Thanks.
Hey, so that was our interview with Bob McLeod. Pretty cool guy, right? I have to say, we've interviewed a lot of people, and he is one of the few who just is, really chill about his work. He enjoys the work that he does, but, he does what he has to do and he moves on. He's not like us who's hung up on everything that he's done over the years. It's just another project, but I can respect that. And that's certainly not a bad thing.
And, when you have an artist whose work stands the test of time as his does, it's really hats off to him and the work and effort he put in. So we hope you enjoy it. We hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Because it's Thanksgiving, we're not going to bore you with the details on where to find us. You know where to find us. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Have a wonderful time with your family, and we'll talk to you soon.